Alright, peace everybody. Today's video I want to talk about warfare. And when you study warfare on a basic level, read the book The Art of War by Sun Tzu. He talk about a time in which you have to retreat or give your enemy a chance to retreat, to leave, to escape, and to regroup. And it is time to retreat and regroup. This is when peace treaties are discussed. This is when negotiations happen because the battle temporarily ceased. But in this particular country, the so-called black people are in a similar situation in which we have been systematically destroyed and devastated for 100 straight years without a chance to regroup, to rejuvenate, and to reestablish. We've been as an onslaught, a non-stop onslaught, economically, physically, whatever. Just non-stop chaos and destruction and psychological trauma. So I think it's time for black people to consider regrouping and retreating away from American United States society, going into seclusion and giving us a chance to repopulate, to rejuvenate our population, and to rejuvenate our economy and our destroyed businesses. And I think the first step in doing that, something that requires little to no energy, is to take your finances out of these Caucasian controlled institutions, banks, because these Caucasian banks don't really reinvest any of the money on a significant level back into the black people's community. They actually take this money that we put into these bank accounts and give it to Caucasian institutions so they could gentrify the communities or to destroy us, or they give it to foreigners to control our economics and to gentrify our neighborhoods. So financing these Caucasian controlled banks such as Chase, US Bank, Wells Fargo, whatever, you're really financing your own destruction. So I think the first step is for all of the so-called black people to take all of their money out of these Caucasian controlled banks and put them into black banks, black owned banks, credit unions, or whatever, or just take them out if you can't find a black bank. But there's several black banks you could actually choose from to reallocate your resources. One is called One United, which is an online only bank. I think they're headquartered in Michigan Avenue. I have a bank account with them. Another is called Liberty Bank and Trust Company, which is headquartered in New Orleans, Louisiana, and they have locations in, I think, 9 to 10 cities. One of the states they have a location is Illinois, which is convenient for me because I'm in Chicago. And by putting money into these black-owned banks, each dollar you put into that bank, that gives that bank $10 to be able to lend to other black people. Because according to the Federal Reserve or the New Deal, they have something called fractional reserve banking, in which a bank can lend up to 10 times more than they have in reserves. So whatever you put into that bank can lend 10 times more to other people, or even to you. You could take your auto loan. I know the average auto loan for black people is 20%, and refinance that auto loan in a black bank. Take your mortgage that you probably have with Chase or Bank of America or one of these other predatory Caucasians, and go to a black bank and refinance with them. This is a way for the so-called black people to reestablish economic power and to ensure that the so-called black businesses can get the capital that they need, because we all know that Caucasian controlled banks are not willing to lend money to black people who have business ideas or whatever. So I think that's a way to retreat on those semi level, not totally retreating, but retreat from these Caucasian controlled banks, retreat from these colleges, these Caucasian controlled educational institutions. We should have an exodus, a mass exodus towards black banks and black educational institutions, because when we had segregation in America, which actually mandated that we do this, have black banks and black schools, that was actually successful. We actually had tremendous success during this segregation period. So I think we should start to re-segregate ourselves from Caucasian and non-black economic institutions, to ensure that that money will be used to empower ourselves and our future. And then we need to actually separate from this United States government, because the land and the government are two different things. We always had different nations in the United States. You know, when we was indigenous people, Indians, and we could do that now. We have sovereignty. You know, we are a political body. Trump actually gave an idea of how to actually go about this, meaning that the people have to unite as a political body and then determine their destiny, be it demanding reparations or demanding independence and separation. We have to do that as a political body. And I think the ideas that's been circulating were not the right ideas. We focus a lot on white supremacy instead of empowerment, self-improvement. Like, we read self-improvement books, Dale Carnegie. There's many self-improvement. How can you improve your own verbal communication skills? How can you improve your communication skills with other people, interpersonal skills? How can you improve your business skills? You can improve yourself, as opposed to worrying about and thinking about the dominant society and what they're doing to you. I'm more about what can we do to prevent them from doing things to you. Now, the art of war tells you, if your enemy is 10 times bigger than you, get out their way, avoid them. If they're that powerful, just avoid them totally. If you're 10 times more than your enemy, surround them. If you're equal in size, then it's a stalemate. You know, people usually attack weaker foes. Equal power enemies usually don't attack each other, because that would ensure mutual destruction, and it's not in anybody's interest to be put in a position to be destroyed. Only gladiators and knights and people that's in combat sports, you know, you put the strongest against the strongest. But then when it comes to nations, strong nations usually attack weak nations, because it's a guaranteed victory, and you could guarantee to take all of their spoils. So it's imperative that the so-called black people develop military strength, a means of self-defense, so the enemy would think a few times before attacking. If they know that your military capability is very subpar and your chances of retaliation is very unlikely, you are a guaranteed target to them. To be all of your possessions, all of your children, your women will be divided amongst them, because you don't have the means to threatening them, threatening annihilation. We have to get into the idea of threatening annihilation to people who deem us a threat, or we deem a threat. They gotta know that we have at a press of a button, we can annihilate them, and that will ensure your longevity. Protesting and talking about white supremacy is not producing strength and fear. It's not producing a situation in which the enemy will fear attacking you, fear the consequences, fear your retaliation. This is the reason countries like North Korea and China, people never attack them, because they fear retaliation. They fear mutual destruction. Or the enemy's capabilities might be superior to yours, so you might actually be in a vulnerable position in which they could actually legally conquer your country, because you preemptively strike them, but they just had the superior firepower, and they legally, natural law can take your country because it was a so-called war, a just war, in which you're defending yourself against the aggressors. Now, the so-called Negro needs to be in that position as an independent body, an independent country with military prowess to threaten anybody's existence, whoever deemed to attack us. Now, the so-called Negro is that, the threat. The whole world feared the so-called American Negro, but we're under the subjection of the United States government. We're not like a sovereign nation. We have the soldiers and we have the capability. We just don't have the independence, and we don't have the proper leadership. We don't have economic independence and economic power. And that comes from, for one, it comes from unity. Also, it comes from unity, and it comes from economics and intelligence. We must have liaisons and diplomats sent all over the world to represent our interests, economic interests, political interests, mutual exchange, mutual trade with other countries. We must have people sent to other countries, and we must form allies to other countries who will actually be willing to fight with us against our common enemies, because the United States government has been proven over and over that they are the enemy of the so-called black people, and they must be seen in their proper perspective. You see, we have been deceived for many generations. Our Negro leadership, the talented tent Negroes, the black Greeks, have been force feeding us the idea, the notion that we can somehow integrate and become cool with our enemy, even though they're killing you, burning you alive, lynching you, burning your cities down. Instead of going to common sense reaction, meaning fight warfare, like they did in Bronzeville in 1919. These Negro preachers and Christians and black Greeks telling you to integrate, hold hands with your oppressor, be cool with your oppressor, even though they're robbing and killing you, beating you down. They don't want anything to do with you. They don't want you in their restaurants. In your own country, this is a foreign colonist in your country oppressing you. You have the right to evict these people. You have a right to get rid of these people who deem you a threat in your own country, that you've been here at least 400 years, meaning longer than anybody else. At least. We know we've been here for thousands and millenniums because this is our original land, but these people have the nerve to oppress you in your own country. That means we have the right to remove these people from our country for our own self-preservation, because everybody have a right to self-defense, self-preservation, and self-determination. A right not to be annihilated, a right not to be killed, human rights. And this starts, the first step is to find a black banking institution and transfer your money and refinance your accounts with a black owned bank. Empower them, because we're more likely to be empowered by a black bank than a Caucasian controlled bank.